order and just go through. I know a lot of this is review of what we studied in earlier books, chapters, but it must be really very important. If you'll think about it, here's Moses repeating what they have experienced in the past 40 years since God saved them from Egypt. Yes, they were saved from Egypt. These people were saved from sinful Egypt, and God has been with them for the 40 years since they were saved. And they have strayed, and they have grumbled and complained for 40 years. And there's this new generation that Moses is preparing to go into the promised land, the land of milk and honey. And God has seen fit that Moses in this book of Deuteronomy so far is that he is reminding them of what they've seen and what they've done. And we're about to get here in the next few chapters a warning, back chapter 13, but we'll start with 11 before we get there. And if you think about that, 40 years, their mothers and fathers are the ones that left Egypt for the most part. And then this next generation is hearing these words from Moses. Now you think back. Now they've got to be warned. God is doing this for a purpose. He's warning them, he's telling them, he's reviewing, he's repeating the law, the rules that they need to continue receiving God's blessings. And that's what we've read in the past few chapters. Obey, receive blessing. Obey, receive blessing. That's the previous chapters. It's been over. Now you think about it, 40 years since the mothers and fathers were saved from Egypt, slavery, servitude, and they've got to be warned again like this. Now you think about 40 years ago. Where were you 40 years ago? It seems like you could remember pretty well what your mom and dad had told you 40 years ago when you were pulled out of that land of slavery and you'd seen the miracles of God performed and heard about that from your mother and father. But how easily, obviously, they can forget and they can be swayed from the world, the people, those people in Canaan, where they're going, those Canaanites. And they were already grumbling and complaining that first generation before they even were exposed to the Canaanites. But anyway, that's why I think it's so important, Moses' review here with these people, is to burn it into their minds, make them aware. And he's not going to be there to hold their hand as they go into the promised land either. We already know that his last breath is going to be on the other side of Jordan, not on the promised land side. He's not going to be there to hold their hand. So for them to continue to receive that blessing, they need to obey as they go in. And that's what he's stressing here. So chapter 11, I'm going to start here with verse 1 in a minute. Some more miracles revisited, more warnings. They need to be diligent in following God's instruction, adhering to it. And of course, the promise of blessing is what we're going to see. Obey equals blessing. Obey equals blessing. It's pretty easy once you get in the hang of it there. If they'll obey, they will be blessed. And the past 40 years, they've really been blessed despite the fact that they didn't obey a lot of times. They were sustained in the wilderness with food and water, protected from their enemies as they came through, just by obeying God's rules at that time. All right? Verse 1, I'm going to read. Chapter 11, verse 1. Therefore thou shalt love the Lord thy God and keep his charge and his statutes and his judgments and his commandments always. So following, just the fact that they're following God's commandments and rules, that's a sign of love on their part. If they fail to do that, obviously there's no love there. But Moses is instructing them now. Do what he says. Charge, that's the ceremonies. statutes, social ordinances, judgments, that's going to be judicial matters, and the commandments will be the law. If they follow all of those and do as he says, it's a sign of love for God that they do when they do that, when they do what God says. I'm going to read verses 2 through 7. And know ye this day, for I speak not with your children which have not known and which have not seen the chastisement of the Lord your God. This is that new generation. The ones that would have seen it and felt it and been a part of it was back in that past 40 years. And his miracles and his acts which he did in the midst of Egypt unto Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and to all his land. You know, this is repeated. Moses repeats these different things. What the plagues when Pharaoh's heart was hardened, leading up to that, parting of the Red Sea. All this is repeated over and over. And what he did unto the army of Egypt, unto their horses, and to their chariots, how he made the water of the Red Sea to overflow them as they pursued after you, and how the Lord hath destroyed them unto this day. And what he did unto you in the wilderness until you came into this place, and what he did unto Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, the son of Reuben, how the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their households, and their tents, and their substance, and all the substance that was in their possession in the midst of all Israel. But your eyes have seen all the great acts which the Lord he did. So there we are, the miracles revisited. And these miracles, you know, I've said repeated. I believe they happened just like the Bible says it happened. It's not too far a stretch for me to believe what the Bible says in the Old Testament about the miracles of God. As I said before, believe in a Savior that was overcome death so that we all might live. And if that's not a miracle, they've never been a miracle. That is a miracle. So it's no far stretch. All right, verses 8 through 12. I'll read those. Therefore shall ye keep all the commandments which I command you this day, that ye may be strong and go in and possess the land, whether you go to possess it. You know, follow God's commandments is what they told there, and be strong. Not wishy-washy, not flip-flopping, not doing whatever's right in their own eyes or what they felt like at the moment. Do the commandments and do then, is what he said, and do it then, to possess the land, that you may prolong your days in the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers to give unto them and to their seed, a land that floweth with milk and honey. 10. For the land whither thou goest in to possess it is not as the land of Egypt, from whence ye came out of, where thou sowedst thy seed and waterest it with thy foot as a garden of herbs. You know, in that land of Egypt right there, God's telling them right there, this is not like the land of Egypt where you left and the work of your own hands and your own feet provided made the crops profit or made them fruitful. You know, they had to irrigate from that Nile River. That meant moving water and digging and different ways to get that water moving around in there by man done it. But God's telling them they're going to a land, milk and honey, where this you don't have to do. The things that God's going to bless them with, the sustained life, is going to be because of the rain that he provides. It's going to be a whole different thing. It's going to be a whole different system than what they were accustomed to down there in Egypt. But the land whither you go to possess it is a land of hills and valleys, and drinketh water of the rain of heaven, a land which the Lord thy God careth for. The eyes of the Lord thy God are always upon it from the beginning of the year even unto the end of the year. So there again, if they obey, they will be blessed. And Moses is telling them that God provides for this land. God, from the rains from heaven, from the sky above, comes from God. It's not by the work of man. It's going to be by what God provides for them. All right, 13 through 15. And it shall come to pass, if ye hearken diligently unto my commandments, which I have commanded, not just every now and then, but diligently. Diligent in their actions, in their following of the commandments. That's all the time, every day, which I command you this day, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. That I will give you the rain of your land in his due season, the first rain and the latter rain, that thou mayest gather in thy corn and thy wine and thine oil. And I will send grass in thy fields for thy cattle, that thou may eat and be full. All right. So God, there again, what we just talked about, if they obey, they're going to be blessed with the life-sustaining rains. The cattle will be fed. Everything will be taken care of. God will take care of. So if they hearken, that's the lesson. Love God and serve God. That's the main thing of those verses there. Now I'm going to read 16 through 17. Take heed to yourselves that your heart not be deceived, and you turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. And this is a real warning. You know, this is going to be repeated again in the upcoming chapter. God would not give them this warning. God would not direct them to be aware, be diligent in thinking about God, but he's warning them this is going to be a real problem for them. And Moses is telling them this, repeating it over and over. Do you think God would warn these people if it wasn't a real issue, that they're going to be susceptible to falling for the belief of false gods? And it's going to be a real hazard, a real problem. That's why it's repeated here. 16 through 17. Take heed to yourselves. That's what you turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. And then, verse 17, and then the Lord's wrath be kindled against you. So we're going to see what God's tolerance is for these people to worship other gods. There's the one true God. And that was the problem in this land of Canaan, and really in other parts of the world too. Egypt in particular, and Canaan. What did they have? They had all these ideas of these false gods that they were led astray, and they were believing and worshiping in different ways. And they would build these idols, make these idols, and they'd think they could draw them gods into them. They wanted them God. They could draw them gods in close to them. That's why they worship these idols. They do their little ceremonies and make these little figurines, and they think it would be, trying to think of the good word, but overtake them with that false god, that false spirit, and that's what they would worship. And that's going to be the real problem here. But there's the one true God that can't be lured down into an idol. There's the one true God. He is above everything. He is creator of all. And God cannot be lured down into an idol or a figure that these people have got the bad habits of doing in this land. And again, God's children are being warned. Don't fall for this. All right? And of course, we know God's tolerance here. His wrath is going to be kindled against them. That's verse 17. And then and he shut up the heaven that there be no rain. God is warning them. Here's going to be the punishment if you fall for this. That the land yield not her fruit. That's because there's no rain to water it, lest you perish quickly from off the good land which the Lord giveth you. There's no promise here unless they obey and follow God's commandments and statutes. Verse 18, therefore shall you lay up these my words in your heart, in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they be frontless between your eyes. Practicing Jews, these even today I can't think of the word right. I can't pronounce it, but anyway, they'll put the verses in a little compartment on their forehead or on their arms, and they still follow that by trying to follow these words here. All right. Idolatry, the main thing for them verses we just read, idolatry equals what? Death. That's going to be the only outcome for these people if they fall for idolatry. All right, let me pick up. I just read 18. I'm going to start over with 18 here. Therefore you shall lay up these words, that's what we was talking about, the phylacteries, in your heart and your soul, and bind them for the sign upon your hand, that they may be frontless between your eyes. And ye shall teach them your children, speaking of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, when thou risest up. So when are they to be sharing these words with their family? It's all the time, right here, from daylight to dark, right here. When they lay down, when they get up, the whole 9 yards. All right. There you go to 20. And thou shalt write them upon the doorposts of thine house. Remember, we covered that not long ago in the previous chapters. I think they call that, then today, they call it the Shema, and they put the verses around the door and for when they enter, okay? Upon the doorpost of thine house and upon thy gates, so they don't never forget that the Lord is the great and one and only true God, that your days may be multiplied in the days of your children in the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers to give them as the days of heaven upon the earth. So there again, following what God commands equals blessing. And the days will be multiplied. They'll be fruitful. They'll live longer. All right. All right, 22 through 25. For if ye shall diligently keep all these commandments which I command you to do them, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to cleave unto him, draw close to God, then will the Lord drive out all these nations from before you, and ye shall possess greater nations and mightier than yourselves. So as they're going into this land and they'll obey God, what is God going to do? It's not that they're going to drive out these nations that are already established there. It's God's going to drive them out for them. So, I mean, they're being told, Moses is telling them now, that God's going to do the work for you. Remember, that's what happened at Kadesh Barnea. The same thing had been told to that generation at Kadesh Barnea, that they could go into the land and take it. But then they saw the giants, and they got scared. And we all know how that ended up for them. So, all right, let me keep going here, 22 through 25. All right, 24. 24. Every place whereon the soles of your feet shall tread shall be yours, from the wilderness of Lebanon, from the river Euphrates, even to the uttermost sea shall your coast be. Now, I don't know about y'all, but if the river Euphrates, that's a much bigger section of land than what they currently reside in now, if you think about it, all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. So, they had the promise to have a lot. And it did expand from what it going to be here at the very beginning when it got to King Solomon's time. It'll be a much bigger kingdom. But I don't think it ever really got to the maximum point that it could have been, And that's because, some failures that we're going to read about moving forward. And when they conquest the land, not every time is everything going to get wiped out like God commanded. And it's going to come back to cause problems in the future. So, all right. So what do we know? God keeps telling them, obey is going to equal blessing. If they don't obey, it's not going to be blessed. It's not going to be fully fruitful if they don't obey diligently to the max, to everything he says. All right? So, all right, let me see. 25, did I get it? Yeah, they will stand before you. Yeah, 25. There shall no man be able to stand before you, for the Lord your God shall lay the fear of you and the dread upon all the land that ye shall tread upon, and he hath said unto you. And that's going to be true as we move forward and we get into in the upcoming books. We're going to find out when they go into Jericho. If you'll remember when the spies go in to spy out Jericho. Now, what did Rahab say when she seen them there at the wall? If you'll remember, she said, people are already aware. They're dreading y'all coming. So even at that point, this here's coming to pass, what God's telling them right here. As they're approaching, the spies are in Jericho, those people are already worried about what's coming because they've heard about these people. That fear is going to be upon them inhabitants of Jericho. And from what I can tell from recent discoveries, they've got drawings, and after they've excavated Jericho, that city had two formidable walls. It was a well-protected city. And so for them to be afraid of what was coming, it says something to the fear that God had put into them people of Jericho at that point in time. All right. 26 and 27, let's see. Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you this day. Pretty straightforward. And 28, and a curse if you will not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside out of the way which I command you this day to go after other gods which ye have not known. Now, what by now should they really know not to do? Go after other gods, because it's plain as day right there. 28 to 32. And a curse, if you will not, I didn't read 28. Yeah, okay, 29. And it shall come to pass when the Lord thy God hath brought thee in unto the land whither thou goest to possess it, that thou shalt put the blessing upon Mount Gerizim and the curse upon Mount Ebal. Are they not on the other side Jordan, by the way where the sun goeth down in the land of the Canaanites, which dwell in the champaign against Gilgal beside the plains of Morah? For ye shall pass over Jordan to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God giveth you, and he shall possess it and dwell therein. And ye shall observe to do all the statutes and judgments which I set before you this day. All right, and then Shechem is going to be a city in between those cities. That's where they're going to initially set up. I think that's where the first worship place is going to be. We'll find out about that in here. But the main thing here in this verse, there's more of this story coming up in the next chapters. Gerizim is a big mountain there. It's going to equal blessing. And Mount Ebal is going to be the cursing. And that's a real good visual for these people as they go into this land, as a reminder. You know, it's in their face. They can see it. They see it all every day there in that land is what it's going to be. And and they will formally declare a blessing from them, we'll read in the future, and a curse from Ebal. So I'll hold that off until we get to that point. All right, so that'll finish up chapter 11. We're going into chapter 12. And we're going to find out here this idolatry, this is to be eradicated. That's what is already established in Canaan. We've talked about that. God's going to select that worship site that I told you about. I think Shechem's the first one, Shiloh's the second, and then in David and Solomon's time there, it's going to end up being Jerusalem with the first full-fledged temple. You know, when Solomon puts it together after David gets all the parts for it. All right, so I'm going to read 1 through 4. These are the statutes and judgments. And you know, that's another thing. God is going to want a one site, a one place here to worship for these people to go to. That's key to think about that, because what did the people of Canaan have? They had worship places all over. They all had their own little thing going on in the different towns and cities. And God is going to establish a place and stick with it for a while until he decides to move it and end up in Jerusalem. But that is to keep those people, they come to that place, they gather there, they meet, they socialize there. That's key. Because if they're all scattered all over the place like the Canaanites, they're so easily plucked apart and pulled astray and led off in different directions and other false gods. So that's a key thing here to think about here as we're reading in this, why God is going to have that central location for these people to meet and be together and worship him. All right? 1 through 4. These are the statutes and judgments which ye shall observe to do in the land, which the Lord God of thy fathers giveth thee to possess it all the days that ye live upon the earth. Ye shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which ye shall possess serve their gods, upon the high mountains, upon the hills, and under every green tree. There again, okay, let me read 3. And ye shall overthrow their altars, and break their pillars, and burn their groves with fire. And ye shall hew down the graven images of their gods, and destroy the name of them out of that place. Ye shall not do so unto the Lord your God. Think about these high places. This goes all the way back to Babylon. You know, you think they built the Tower of Babel, same place. You know, there again, yeah, they was trying to get close to their gods, but they trying to draw God down, and that ain't going to work. That's never going to work. And this is the same thing that's going on here. You think about the nations that left Babel after they were dispersed. There was one man that God chose for his people, and that was Abraham. Now think about what happened to all them other people, them nations that was split apart and left Babel. They all got these false gods, and Egypt, you know, all the people come to Egypt, the Canaanites, north of there, south of there, down in Midian. They had their own problems, what we call Saudi Arabia now. They all had their own different things, but it was all these numerous gods if you look at it. And that's the problem, is where they're going in here. All right? And God's telling them this got to be destroyed for you to receive the blessing that he's going to give them. Because if they don't, they're going to end up just like the 70 nations. I think it was 70 that was dispersed from Babel, Tower of Babel. All right. 1 through 4. 5. And I'm going to read 5 through 7. But unto the place which the Lord your God shall choose out of all your tribes to put his name there, even unto his habitation, ye shall seek, and thither thou shalt come. And thither ye shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices and your tithes and your heave offerings of your hand and your vows and your freewill offerings and the firstlings of the herds of your flocks. One more. And there shall eat before the Lord your God, and ye shall rejoice in all that you put your hand up unto, ye and your households, wherein the Lord thy God has blessed thee. There again, this is that central location. All of this is to happen. This will keep them close. This will keep them accountable to what they're doing. And God will be on their mind, and they're not going to be subject to be divided by hanging out at other places. All right? Verses 8 through 9, we'll read them. Ye shall not do after all the things that we do here this day. Every man whatsoever is right in his own eyes. And you'll hear that later on in the Bible too. Where everybody in the book of Judges, it was a time and period when everybody was doing what they thought was right in their own eyes. For you are not as yet come to the rest and to the inheritance which the Lord your God giveth you. All right? Warned not to do what was right in their eyes. We know what that's going to end up like. Verses 10 through 14. But when you go over Jordan and dwell in the land which the Lord your God giveth you to inherit, and when he giveth you rest from all your enemies round about you, so that ye dwell in safety, then there shall be a place which the Lord your God shall choose to cause his name to dwell there. Thither shall ye bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes and your heave offering of your hand, and all your choice vows which ye vow unto the Lord. And ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God, ye and your sons and your daughters, and your manservants and your maidservants, and the Levite that is within your gates, for as much as he hath no part nor inheritance with you. Just a reminder, they've got their lifestyle. They didn't get a land inheritance like the other tribes is going to get. Take heed to thyself that offer not thy burnt offerings in every place that thou seest, not just everywhere, but in the place which the Lord shall choose in one of thy tribes, there thou shalt offer thy burnt offerings, and there shalt do all that I command thee. So one thing I think you can see is when God gives a warning, is God going to give a warning for something that is not possible? No. If God gives these people a warning, it's because it's possible and most likely probable that they're going to do it. And so what you see here is God's warning them. He picks this central location that is critical and key for them because they are probably going to have the tendency to want to go do their sacrificing and worship God however they want to, not how God tells them to. So Moses is warning them here, and that's what you're going to see. And then the kingdom splits in the future. We're going to see, we're going to have the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom coming in the future. After the time of Solomon. And what's going to be one of the first things they do in the northern kingdom? They're going to have their own worship center up there. That's what they're going to have. So it's going to happen. And God, through Moses, God's telling them this is what you got to watch out for. So man, these people has a tendency to want to worship God in his own way, their own way. They're going to want to serve. They're going to want to make their tithes and their offerings and their sacrifices where they see fit. So here's the warning that they don't need to fall for that. All right? So I got 14, 15 through 27, yeah. Notwithstanding, thou mayest kill and eat flesh in all thy gates, whatsoever thy soul lusteth after, according to the blessing of the Lord. And remember, they're going to have, they still got to follow the law and the commandments to get them as far as clean and unclean. We went through all that back in Leviticus. there's going to be a warning here about blood. Lord thy God, which hath given thee the unclean and the clean meat thereof, as the roebuck and the hart. Only ye shall not eat the blood. Ye shall pour it upon the earth as water. Thou mayest not eat within thy gates the tithe of thy corn, or thy wine, or the oil of the firstlings of the herds, or the flock, nor any of the vows which thou vowest, nor thy freewill offering or heave offering of thine hand. But thou must eat them before the Lord thy God in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose, thou and thy son and thy daughter, and thy manservant and their maidservant, and the Levite that is within the gates, and thou shalt rejoice before the Lord thy God in all that thou puttest thine hands unto. Take heed to thyself that thou forsake not the Levite as long as you livest on the earth. They're not to forget the Levite. Remember, they're going to be sustained. God sustained the Levites from the obedience of all the other tribes, people of the other tribes. All right. And when the Lord God shall enlarge thy border as he hath promised thee, so, it's going to start out small, but it's going to get bigger. And thou shalt say, I will eat flesh, because thou so longest to eat flesh, thou mayest eat flesh, whatsoever thy soul lusteth after. 21. If the place which the Lord thy God hath chosen to put his name there be too far from thee, then thou shalt kill of thy herd and thy flock which the Lord hath given thee, as I have commanded thee, and thou shalt eat in thy gates whatsoever thy soul lusteth after. Even as a roebuck and the hart is eaten, so thou shalt eat them. The unclean and clean shall eat of them alike. Only be sure that thou eat not the blood, for the blood is the life, and thou mayest not eat the life with the flesh. Thou shalt not eat it, thou shalt pour it upon the earth as water. Thou shalt not eat it, that it may go well with thee and with thy children after thee, when thou shalt do what is right in the sight of the Lord. Only thy holy things which thou hast in thy vows thou shalt take, and go into the place which the Lord shall choose. And thou shalt offer thy burnt offerings, the flesh and the blood, upon the altar of the Lord thy God, and the blood of the sacrifices shall be poured out upon the altar of the Lord thy God, and thou shalt eat the flesh. Right. More specific directions as was given back in Leviticus, special holy offerings ate at the tabernacle only. Life, remember the blood, life is in the blood. That's why they're directed not to eat this, and it's also used as an atonement. And we see that. So that's why the strict rules against that. All right, verse 28. Might get through here. Observe and hear all these words which I command thee, that it may go well with thee and with thy children after thee forever, when thou doest that which is good and right in the sight of the Lord. Observe and hear. More instructions to obey. Listen, hearken. Equals blessing. Blessing from obeying. Now I'm going to read 29 through 31. I'll get through this. I think I can get through here. When the Lord thy God shall cut off the nations from before thee, we know what that means. That's those people in Canaan. Whether thou goest to possess them, and thou succeedest them, and dwellest in their land, take heed to thyself that thou be not snared. That's a key word there, snared. It's not like God, Moses is warning them that it's like a trap. You think about it, it's going to be there. Is a trap obvious to what's being trapped? Usually not. It's going to be hard to see. It's going to be baited. So they need to be really careful as they go into this land, because it's as a snare. It's not something that can be obvious. And so the warning is there. By following them, after that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. All right, and they don't need to get to thinking about when they get into this land, if these people seem to be prosperous or whatever it was, that they get to thinking that that's because of their false gods that they was worshiping. That's not going to be it. Thou shalt not do unto the Lord thy God, for every abomination to the Lord which he hateth hath they done unto their gods. For even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods. What things soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereto, nor diminish from it. If that's not a warning of the lowest level at which these people can can stoop to, and they're worshiping in these false gods. And that is the ultimate warning right there, is the way I look at it, that Moses is giving them from God. All right. I'm going to dismiss us with a prayer.